Gong Ryong was born to a single mother who died shortly after his birth. Fortunately, his mother's close friends raised him. The three sisters supported themselves by working as hostesses despite their modest looks, often struggling to get paid by customers. To fund his education, Gong Ryong took matters into his own hands, personally collecting tuition fees from customers who skipped out on their bills. He graduated with excellent grades and started working in a hospital as a gynecologist. Gong Ryong proved his skill in delivering babies. All babies he helped deliver were born successfully. As his experience grew, so did the complexity of his work environment. Whether it was on a speeding train or in a high-risk swimming pool, he successfully delivered babies. He earned a reputation as an expert in childbirth in the gynecology field, but also faced challenging situations. The son of a wealthy family, due to a hereditary illness, had abnormal sperm that could not produce life. Gong Ryong became the personal doctor to this family's son. Fate had more in store for him. After a traffic accident, he met the chairman's daughter, Kang Soo. When she stepped out of the car, blood flowed down her thigh. Gong Ryong rushed her to the hospital, where she was diagnosed with an ectopic pregnancy, which required immediate surgery to save her life. Without waiting for Kang Soo's consent, Gong Ryong administered anesthesia, but she did not fall asleep. Instead, she ranted about astronaut Choi Go-yoon's scoundrel behavior and even vowed to castrate him. Fueled by anger, she resisted the anesthesia and asked Gong Ryong not to tell her father. As the surgery time approached, Gong Ryong agreed to her request. The surgery was successful, but a few days later, the chairman sent men to abduct him. In the vast sea, the sight of concrete and iron barrels was starkly menacing. It seemed that no tycoon was without ruthlessness. Despite everything, Gong Ryong stood firm in his initial decision. The chairman began to see him in a new light and decided to give him a chance, although there was still a punishment. The next morning, the hospital fired Gong Ryong, and other hospitals were too afraid to hire him. Even small clinics turned him away. He thought his life would be dull and uninteresting, but fate had other plans. Kang Soo secretly fell for the skilled gynecologist and made a bold move to clear any misunderstandings. Faced with such a proactive and wealthy woman, Gong Ryong was momentarily stunned. To calm his impulses, he went to a restaurant to drink, but Kang Soo appeared again. Taking advantage of Gong Ryong's inebriation, she pressed her advantage. Overwhelmed by wealth and beauty, he finally gave in. One passionate night confirmed their relationship, and their feelings quickly deepened, sealing a promise never to betray each other. Inspired by Kang Soo's accidental ectopic pregnancy, Gong Ryong theorized that space could alter defective sperm genes. The chairman supported this idea and paid a staggering $7 billion to send Gong Ryong to space. However, tragedy struck unexpectedly when the chairman's son tried to save a subordinate, but ended up sacrificing himself. Devastated by the loss of his closest kin and the discontinuation of his lineage, the chairman mourned deeply. On the same day, Gong Ryong embarked on his space journey, carrying the chairman's hopes. The booster rockets fired brightly, and within an hour, he reached the clouds. Like a sword, the rocket continued its journey to space. Upon reaching a certain altitude, the fairing completed its mission and detached, exposing the spacecraft completely to space, marking the completion of the first stage. As the sensation of weightlessness intensified, Gong Ryong's stomach churned uncontrollably, and all he could do was endure. Finally, they reached the target orbit, but suddenly a mysterious object appeared, spinning rapidly in space. A severed arm collided with the spacecraft, slicing through a small part of the solar panels and causing the cabin to spin. After numerous rolls, the commander pressed the automatic adjustment button. Meanwhile, Gong Ryong, who had endured too long, had passed out. Experienced Eve Kim immediately recognized the signs of an airway obstruction. Without timely intervention, brain damage would occur in 4 minutes, and death could follow in 7. The Heimlich maneuver was necessary, but performing it in zero gravity was extremely challenging. Eve Kim had to anchor herself using the cabin's handles, place her hands on his stomach, and forcefully push upward. After several attempts, Eve Kim's toes were bleeding from the effort, but she finally dislodged the apple blocking Gong Ryong's airway. As Gong Ryong regained consciousness, the first thing he saw was droplets of blood floating in the air, and the woman before him seemed increasingly appealing. This warm and caring sensation left Gong Ryong enchanted. Eve Kim checked his condition again, but this action stirred an odd feeling in him. After a brief eye contact, Gong Ryong conceded defeat. Noticing Eve Kim's bleeding toe, he insisted that stitches were needed, and he conveniently had surgical tools with him. Despite her reluctance, Eve Kim had to agree due to his persistent persuasion. However, in zero gravity, Gong Ryong struggled to thread the needle. Frustrated, Eve Kim took over and threaded it effortlessly, only to discover that the anesthesia injector was missing. Reluctantly, Eve Kim told Gong Ryong to just sew without anesthesia, even claiming she could endure the pain. Gong Ryong was even more nervous than Eve Kim, who proved to be very strong. She managed to endure the pain with cries, and the surgery was successful. Eve Kim patted him on the shoulder to express her thanks. As she was preparing to leave, Gong Ryong stopped her to compliment her resilience, especially praising her thumb. South Korea had built a space station, gathering the nation's top biologists to research complex problems that couldn't be solved on Earth. As the nation watched, the spacecraft successfully docked at the station, but there was a delay in opening the door. Unknown to them, Eve Kim was about to open the door when she noticed several fruit flies that had accompanied them from Earth, having escaped from a fruit box. This was Eve Kim's first time witnessing such a phenomenon. These fruit flies weren't medicated experimental subjects, but the first live organisms to travel to space on their own. Observing the fruit flies mating suggested that they might reproduce in the vast universe without any external intervention. Consequently, the docking was delayed by 20 minutes due to her actions. After the fruit flies finished mating, Gong Ryong saw a different side of Commander Eve Kim. He had thought women would not break the rules, but at this crucial moment, she made everyone wait, which intrigued him even more. Finally, at 10 a.m. world time, under the watchful eyes of the nation, the hatch was opened. However, Gong Ryong was still not used to moving in zero gravity. He had to cling tightly to Eve Kim's legs, and seeing his hesitant demeanor, Eve Kim looked helplessly at him. Gong Ryong announced that he had brought gifts, and his mission involved a hidden item in a box. Recently, the sole heir of the conglomerate had died unexpectedly, without leaving any descendants. The daughter-in-law found a way that might allow the chairman to have a grandson, despite the son's abnormal sperm, which was not only infertile, but also unsuitable for artificial insemination. In zero gravity, there was a chance to restore the sperm to its natural state, and these were concealed inside an ice cream box. The plan was progressing smoothly until Eve Kim took the vanilla-flavored ice cream from Gong Ryong's hands. The viewers watching the broadcast were shocked, fearing the costly opportunity was lost. When Gong Ryong revealed the ice cream, the sharp-eyed Eve Kim sensed something was amiss, confirmed by Gong Ryong's excessive reaction. Since everything brought up had to be declared and involved substantial fees, she doubted it was just a gesture of goodwill and suspected something was hidden. She decided to see what was concealed inside once the ice cream melted, alarming Gong Ryong, as it contained the conglomerate's future heir. Suddenly, there was the sound of a gun being cocked. Eve Kim had aimed at Gong Ryong's head, then proceeded to check what was hidden inside. Despite his anxiety, Gong Ryong dared not move. Fortunately, the inspection report indicated no issues with the food, and Eve Kim put away her gun. Seeing that Gong Ryong wasn't sharing any ice cream with her, Eve Kim snatched it from him, knowing that opportunities to enjoy ice cream were rare in space. After Eve Kim finished eating, her actions shocked Gong Ryong. He had devised this method to bring his girlfriend's sister-in-law's eggs to space. Thus, what Eve Kim held was not just a box, but the continuation of the chairman's lineage. Watching her discard something so crucial as trash, he knew the chairman would never forgive him. Once Eve Kim left, Gong Ryong tore open the box, only to find it empty. Unknown to him, the real secret hidden in the ice cream had already been taken by Choi Go-eun. Gong Ryong was merely a pawn used by the chairman, and the real person responsible for the artificial insemination was Choi Go-eun. Kang Kang-soo burst into the meeting room, overhearing her ex-boyfriend and her father's conversation, and realized she and Gong Ryong had been deceived. Meanwhile, Gong Ryong was still desperately searching for the missing eggs. Then, Kang Kang-soo called him, and through her remorseful words he learned he was just a courier. He immediately sought out Choi Go-eun to retrieve the eggs, but Choi Go-eun mocked him. The father of the child from the abortion surgery he performed for Kang Kang-soo was Choi Go-eun. The chairman and other men accused Gong Ryong of being a murderer, but only he and Kang Kang-soo knew that the surgery was necessary to save her life. Given another chance, Gong Ryong would make the same decision. Choi Go-yoon accused him of being with Kang Kang-soo for money, and boasted about being prepared for a year to precisely inject sperm into an egg in zero gravity. Gong Ryong couldn't refute because he had struggled even to thread a needle while stitching Eve Kim. His decision to risk his life in space was not only for the chairman's future grandson. He had a condition. If the space-based artificial insemination was successful, the results had to be made public, and the conglomerate had to build a fertility clinic in space to help other desperate people have children. This was his main reason for going to space. The next day, Gong Ryong was still trying to retrieve his sister-in-law's eggs when an alarm sounded in the cabin. It turned out that one of the experimental mice had gone mad, biting the other mice in the same cage and attempting to break through the barriers. Since experimental subjects in space are incredibly valuable, letting this continue would result in the crazed mouse killing the other specimens. The command center decided to euthanize mouse number 1, but there was opposition among the crew. During the heated debate, mouse number 1 suddenly suffered a cardiac arrest. As time ticked away and the mouse showed no signs of recovery, Gong Ryong insisted that they needed to perform a thoracotomy. Eve Kim mentioned they had never performed such a procedure on a mouse, but Gong Ryong countered that he had done it on newborns. Eventually, Eve Kim decided to trust Gong Ryong this time. Command center personnel watched the chaos on the screens, feeling helpless but unable to intervene. With the cooperation of other team members, Gong Ryong performed the thoracotomy. Choi Go-eun mocked from the sidelines, but did not stop them. Although Gong Ryong had performed many such surgeries, he was not confident in zero gravity. After some compression, the mouse's breathing normalized, but its heart could not beat on its own, as it was too small. Suddenly, Gong Ryong had an idea. He clamped the mouse's aortic arch and had Eve Kim compress its heart. Finally, after their persistent efforts, the mouse's heart resumed beating. The command center watched in disbelief at this unprecedented feat. The commander, fully aware of the significance, instructed his subordinates to immediately release this news in the media. The space station's crew was also excited by this miracle, and an elated Eve Kim hugged Gong Ryong. Gong Ryan, soon to be a son-in-law, unexpectedly falls for astronaut Eve Kim while holding a photo of his girlfriend Kang Kang-soo, feeling guilty and conflicted. Eve Kim seems like an insurmountable hurdle for him. Soon after, during Gong Ryan's first live space lottery broadcast, Choi Go-yoon asks Eve Kim to buy lottery tickets for everyone, focusing all attention on the lottery draw. This is Choi Go-yoon's plan. He pretends to get coffee for everyone, but is actually injecting eggs. Choi Go-yoon's expertise is evident as he manages to inject 7 out of 10 eggs quickly and is confident of their success. The conglomerate is thrilled, seeing the skilled Choi Go-yoon as a more suitable son-in-law than the poor doctor, Gong Ryan. Meanwhile, a botanist who loves scratch tickets accidentally discovers that a ticket she picked up is a winner. She keeps quiet as her heart races. The next day, Eve Kim and Choi Go-yoon need to go out for repairs due to a previous collision. Gong Ryan learns that Eve Kim will be gone for 7 hours, secretly pleased as he sees a chance to steal the eggs. However, when he finds out that Eve Kim and Choi Go-yoon will be paired together, he panics. He recalls Eve Kim's warning back on Earth that spacewalking is nearly suicidal, and astronauts even write wills before going out. Gong Ryan asks if she wrote a will, his concern palpable, giving Eve Kim an indescribable feeling about him, despite recently disliking him. That night, Eve Kim inexplicably starts writing her will. While listening to music, Choi Go-yoon hears the song title that matches the one on the botanist's winning ticket. At this moment, Kang Kang-soo video calls to harshly criticize Choi Go-yoon and the conglomerate. Unfazed, Choi Go-yoon focuses on Kang Kang-soo's red lips and can't help but compliment his ex-girlfriend's beauty, making Kang Kang-soo feel harassed and abruptly end the call. Gong Ryan tries to crack the cryo storage password and, after several failures, decides to ask a doctor friend for help. This friend is more familiar with the space station and mentions that the centrifuge is making noise from spinning too fast, which could overheat and potentially cause the motor to spark and explode, triggering a fire alarm. This would shut down all module power, temporarily disabling electronic locks. Unable to overheat the centrifuge, Gong Ryan considers using the treadmill at high intensity. His friend warns that running in a zero-gravity environment is very dangerous and could be fatal. But Gong Ryan ignores the warning, obsessed with obtaining the eggs. While Gong Ryan plans his egg theft, Eve Kim finishes writing her will. She plans to leave it with Gong Ryan for safekeeping, but discovers that the fruit flies she saved last time are pregnant. Excited, she goes to find Gong Ryan, but finds he's not there. In her search, she notices that both Gong Ryan's and Choi Go-yoon's rooms have pictures of Kang Kang-soo, but she's too excited about her news to care. She says mating in zero gravity is challenging, and the two talk a lot that night, especially since Eve Kim is planning a risky spacewalk the next day. Gong Ryan feels complex emotions, particularly after learning that Eve Kim has a boyfriend, which dampens his fluctuating thoughts. Eve Kim entrusts her will to Gong Ryan, instructing him not to open it unless something happens to her. This adds a weight to Gong Ryan's heart. The next day, the botanist calls her twin sister to tell her about the winning lottery ticket she found. The ticket is nearly a year old, with 1 month left to claim the prize. Her sister is thrilled. The jackpot is over 500 billion. The female botanist feels guilty about the lottery ticket. Her sister warns her to keep the ticket or face disownment. Soon, it's time for Eve Kim and Choi Go-yoon to go out, with others staying inside for support. Gong Ryan, having some free time, calls his sister-in-law to discuss who should perform the fertility procedure. As a pediatrician, she knows Gong Ryan is the better choice. Confirmed in his role, Gong Ryan gains confidence. Challenges begin both inside and outside the space station. Gong Ryan runs tirelessly on the treadmill, ignoring warnings to rest, and nearly cramps up. Meanwhile, an alert is triggered not for Gong Ryan but for Choi Go-eun due to a problem with his spacesuit, requiring his immediate return. Amidst these issues, a fire alarm goes off, startling everyone. Gong Ryan, having caused the treadmill to smoke, quickly takes 3 of his sister-in-law's eggs before anyone else arrives and gets a scolding, but Eve Kim helps him out of the situation. Returning to his room to recover, Gong Ryan finally takes the time to read Eve Kim's will. At that moment, an emergency occurs outside with Eve Kim facing a life-threatening situation. Reading her will, Gong Ryan learns about her background for the first time. Eve Kim's adoptive father, an American astronaut, died trying to save a colleague, turning the letter into a will and inspiring her dream of space. Eve Kim recounts her story and asks Gong Ryan for a few favors, promising to drink with him back on Earth if he completes them. Gong Ryan is surprised to realize the drink she means is a wake. The sudden alarm tightens Gong Ryan up, and he learns of the near-death situation Eve Kim faced during her task. In space, rescue operations are timed by the second. While others were preparing according to protocol, Gong Ryan rushed out immediately. Sending a space rookie on a rescue mission seemed reasonable to the scriptwriter. Gong Ryan risked his life to save Eve Kim and then fell into a coma. Back on Earth, the Conglomerate was listening to experts, eagerly awaiting the results of the egg fertilization and already envisioning a future successor for the family business. The Conglomerate shared his vision with his daughter-in-law, imagining his grandson inheriting his business empire. Suddenly, the sister-in-law made a shocking statement. She planned to leave the cold, high family with her child. She feared the Conglomerate's ruthless and dictatorial ways, not just as an outsider, but also within the family. Her husband had been forced to manage construction sites he hated and died at one he despised most. She didn't want her child to be controlled by the Conglomerate as her husband had been. Angered, the Conglomerate accused the sister-in-law of having no right to make decisions for her child, claiming everyone loved money and power, and then fired her from her doctor position. Meanwhile, Kang Kang-soo held a press conference, announcing her engagement to Gong Ryan. Eve Kim, well aware of the risks of space, could accept her own accidental death but not others dying in a rescue attempt for her. She harshly criticized Gong Ryan's reckless behavior, telling him to lay low for the next 4 days, fearing she might end up hitting him every time she saw him. Gong Ryan, facing criticism, didn't feel much resentment, but instead tried to appease Eve Kim with a playful and humble attitude, which only led her to leave abruptly with a scowl. Unable to keep secrets, Gong Ryan boasted about successfully stealing the eggs, only to be deflated by Choi Go-eun, informing him that he had successfully fertilized 6 eggs, making Gong Ryan feel his efforts were in vain. Meanwhile, Eve Kim couldn't stop thinking about Gong Ryan risking his life to save her. The female botanist secretly called her sister for help. Her sister advised her to sew the lottery ticket into her underwear so that it would remain unseen unless something unexpected happened. Meanwhile, Gong Ryan, needing to avoid Eve Kim, sought out the astronauts to discuss strategies. Surprisingly, a colleague had smuggled alcohol aboard. The three men shared their limited stock, creating an unimaginable atmosphere. Unfortunately, two of them had work duties, leaving Gong Ryan to drink alone. Though Gong Ryan didn't drink much, he got tipsy. He first went to a sleeping colleague and talked to himself for a while. Then, he approached the botanist, hiding the lottery ticket. Upon learning that the ticket was Choi Go-eun's, she expressed her intention to return it. However, Gong Ryan advised her against returning it, pointing out that Choi Go-eun's family was too wealthy to care about 500 billion. He assured her that she could claim the prize without worries. His words completely baffled the botanist. Eve Kim, suffering from insomnia and fixed in a sleeping bag, was startled by Gong Ryan's sudden appearance. She hoped he wouldn't misbehave while drunk. Unexpectedly, Gong Ryan began by confessing his feelings to Eve Kim.